The military world is known to be cold and unfeeling. But who would have thought that an act rooted in compassion could lead to punishment? On a quiet night at a military base, a shocking event occurred that shook BTS members and left thousands of fans around the world stunned. JUNGKOOK faced disciplinary action for trying to meet TAEHYUNG, and JIMIN was furious. What really happened? Has brotherhood now become a violation? The incident began in a gloomy atmosphere within the barracks. TAEHYUNG, who at the time was emotionally stable, received news that JUNGKOOK had looked gloomy for several days in a row. No one knew the cause, but JUNGKOOK's change was obvious. He seemed distant, quieter, and even refused food. His unit mates noticed that the golden magne had lost his light. Rumors spread. There was a letter, or perhaps a digital message, that depressed JUNGKOOK, but its contents remain a mystery. While the barracks upheld strict rules, TAEHYUNG decided that silence was not the solution. That night, around 11:30 p.m., just minutes before lights out, JUNGKOOK received an uninvited guest. Without permission, carrying only a water bottle and a letter in his pocket, TAEHYUNG quietly stepped into an area that wasn't his. Military CCTV cameras recorded his every move. But what the cameras didn't capture was the humanitarian reason behind each step. What happened next was more shocking than the violation itself. JUNGKOOK, who had barely shown any emotion for a week, cried, not out of fear, but because someone finally came, not as a fellow unit member, but as a brother. This was a simple, yet deeply moving act of empathy. But the military does not see emotion. The military sees a violation. The next morning, TAEHYUNG was summoned to attend a disciplinary hearing. Breaking curfew and inter-unit trespassing are just two of the many non-negotiable military rules. Some sources mentioned that isolation detention was being considered. Amid this fog of uncertainty, it was JIMIN who took an unexpected step. He came to the tribunal and demanded to be heard. JIMIN stood, not as a celebrity or a group senior, but as a human being. If you think TAEHYUNG's action was wrong, then punish me too, he said firmly. The statement shook the room. He reminded everyone that soldiers are not machines, that sometimes we must break the rules to protect someone on the verge of breaking. JIMIN's anger was not without reason. According to circulating internal information, JIMIN once saw his fellow trainee faint due to severe stress. At that time, he broke curfew to accompany him. No one knew because JIMIN never told that story. But upon seeing JUNGKOOK in the same condition, the memory returned and ignited his emotions. Even more surprising, after JIMIN's statement, the disciplinary process against TAEHYUNG was halted. The higher-ups decided to re-examine the case thoroughly. Some officials called the decision a brave yet humane step. But the surprises weren't over. In the quiet days that followed, JUNGKOOK wrote a short message, believed by many to be addressed to JIMIN. Thank you. You reminded me why I want to be better. Not just for myself, but for all of you. This was proof that JIMIN and TAEHYUNG's actions were not merely violations, but an emotional rescue that cannot be measured by barracks rules. Why was JIMIN so upset? Because he knew there is no fault in trying to save someone's soul. The real mistake is when we let rules become reasons to ignore someone suffering. In a closed-door conference, JIMIN told one of the commanders, "We are not ordinary soldiers. We grew up together. If one falls, we all fall." This event opens many questions about mental well-being in military environments. Can rules be compromised in emotional cases? Is there room for empathy among rows of soldiers? One senior officer finally stated, "We've disciplined many things, but this case disciplined our hearts." Fans' reactions were no less intense. Thousands of letters were sent to the military headquarters, most supporting TAEHYUNG and JIMIN's decision. Some even included personal testimonies about how BTS helped them through dark times. One letter read, "If having a heart is wrong, then you are heroes of that mistake." Now, after the storm has passed, TAEHYUNG resumes his duties without a disciplinary record. JIMIN also received no sanctions. But one thing has clearly changed: the way officers see them. No longer just as celebrities to be obeyed, but as young men who dared to take risks to save each other. JUNGKOOK, who had remained silent throughout this process, is now starting to smile again. He greets his comrades, joins morning runs, and starts speaking more. In an internal interview, one of his unit mates said, "It's not about who broke the rule, but who dared to love unconditionally." This story is not just about a military rule violation. It is an emotional narrative that touches many hearts, both inside and outside the military base. It is proof that even in the most rigid places, humanity can prevail, and for JIMIN, his anger wasn't about broken rules, but about a forgotten sense of humanity. In a world that often demands us to be strong, JIMIN reminds us that true courage is when we choose to care, even when the world forbids it. When emotional and dramatic narratives like this surface publicly, especially involving global figures like BTS, we're all pulled into a whirlwind of emotion: sympathy, anger, confusion, even admiration. But behind that storm, one fundamental question should be asked of ourselves: did this really happen? Or are we part of a crafted narrative designed purely to stir our feelings? The event depicting TAEHYUNG breaking military protocol to see JUNGKOOK, followed by JIMIN's bold defense of his friend in an official forum, sounds so real, even moving. But let's pause and ask critically: where did we get this information? Most of it comes from TikTok uploads, YouTube clips, emotional tweets, and long narratives on social media and fan forums. But how many of those sources are truly verified? How many come from official institutions or direct statements from the South Korean military? We can't ignore the fact that the entertainment world, especially the K-pop industry, is well-versed in using the power of narrative and emotion to build engagement. In a world driven by algorithms and emotional monetization, is it possible this story was a scenario designed to reinforce BTS members' image as humane, empathetic, and self-sacrificing individuals? Let's look at it from another angle. South Korea's military rules are known to be strict and impartial, even toward celebrities as popular as BTS. So the question is, could such actions really go without official consequences just because of an emotional statement from a member? Is the military discipline system that flexible, or is the public only seeing a version of the story edited and packaged by certain parties? Also, how can we be sure that quotes like, "If you must punish someone, let it be me," or "He's not just a training mate, he's my brother," were truly spoken in an official hearing? Do we have valid recordings? Official transcripts? Statements from military spokespersons? Or are these merely viral narrative fragments on social media treated as facts because they were shared by large fan accounts? These questions are not meant to accuse anyone of lying. Quite the opposite. This is a call to the public, especially devoted BTS fans, not to get swept up in momentary euphoria without verification. In the digital information era, seeming real doesn't mean actually real. We must also consider how such narratives are used to shape public perception. Stories full of drama, moral values, and emotional sacrifice will easily hypnotize a global audience. But is the ultimate goal humanity? Or is there another dimension like brand loyalty, PR strategy, or even carefully managed public image manipulation? And what if the story isn't entirely fictional, but also not entirely factual? Could it be a reframing of a small incident into a heroic tale to draw public sympathy? Isn't that what often happens in many media narratives today? Therefore, we invite you, readers, fans, and neutral observers, to reflect and ask yourselves, do I believe this story because it's logical and evidence-based? Or because I want to believe it to satisfy my emotions as a fan? Can I distinguish between touching stories and factual truth? And more importantly, what is my responsibility as an information consumer in facing such stories? There's no denying BTS's influence on millions of fans is immense. They're not just idols, but symbols of strength, solidarity, and courage for many. But precisely because they are so admired, we must be increasingly alert to possible narrative distortion. Intentional or not, we're not saying this story is entirely false. We're also not claiming it's entirely true. What we assert is that the information we present comes from sources that require healthy skepticism. Therefore, we urge you not to believe immediately, but to dig deeper, seek clarity, and build understanding based on verification, not emotion alone. Do you feel moved by this story? That's perfectly natural. But the question is, does that feeling come from empathy for facts, or from a story designed to make you feel that way? At the end of this reflection, we invite you to discuss, not just in the comment section, but also within your own space of thought. What do you truly believe?
And why?
In a world full of narratives, only one thing determines the truth: the depth of your own critical thinking. Thank you for reading to the end. And remember, we are not fighting a story, we are seeking the truth.